Welcome back to ASL Boot Camp. This is Neil, and today I'm going to be covering infantry components. I touched on them briefly in exercise 1, but I'm going to go into more detail today on basic infantry components. But before I do that, I'm going to show you two things real quickly. I'm going to show you the ASL rulebook, which I should have showed you in the previous exercise. This is more for people who are currently in the starter kit or not familiar with the system at all, just to give them an idea of what the full ASL rulebook looks like. Then I'm going to show you what a complete order of battle looks like for, in this case, the Americans, because I have them out. I'm going to be working with the American counters today to show you how infantry components work. So let's look at the rulebook real quick. There's several versions of the rulebook. I have the pocket, well, I have all versions of the rulebook. This is the pocket version, pocket edition. There was also, they recently released the electronic version of the rulebook. It's a fully hyperlinked PDF, fully searchable, very cool, and it will always be updated, and you can download it once you pay for it. It's watermarked with your name and account, or name and purchase number, to keep you honest. But you'll get lifetime updates. So when they add new rules or update or introduce errata, you can get the EASL rulebook that way. Obviously, the print version will not be 100% up to date, but it's very close. Then the other version of the rulebook, which I don't use anymore, is the large 3-ring binder. The initial or the original idea for that was to get updated rule pages in modules that were going to come out, and then you would insert them in and take the old pages out. So your rulebook would always be up to date and could be added to quickly. But that kind of went by the wayside, and they've gone with the EASL rulebook and the pocket edition. Mine is spiral bound for easy access and easy folding back. If you have this rulebook, you're considering get this version, I recommend taking it down to your favorite office store, have them zip the side off, and put it in spiral binding. Okay, so the core rules, there are 3 sections for the core rules. There's infantry, chapter A, terrain, chapter B, ordnance/guns, chapter C, and vehicles, chapter D. Everything after that in the ASL system, other than chapter H, which has all the information for your vehicles and guns, like historical and special abilities type of rules. All the other rules in the system are fluff, chrome, optional, special situations, special case, historical special cases, etc. Now, what we're going to be focusing on early on here is infantry chapter A. So let me just turn to that. Let me see if you can see how thick. Chapter A is, not including notes, is 58 pages of rules. And so you can read chapter A and sections of chapter B, the terrain section, depending on what board you're using. You don't need to read the whole section B to play. You just read the specific terrain rules for the boards you're playing on. There are some rules in here I barely ever read because the boards don't show up very often. But 50 pages, 58, 57 pages, I don't know, that's fairly reasonable for a war game these days. You can read chapter A and sections of chapter B, and you can play probably a few thousand scenarios of ASL. You would pass away before you could ever play all of them. So don't let the rulebook intimidate you, like I said in the previous video. A lot of it is optional, a lot of it is Chrome, and you only dive into it if you want to. So here's chapter A. This is all infantry, and we're going to start going through this first. And then chapter B is terrain, and it has rules section for each type of terrain on the different geomorphic boards. And like I said, you don't need to read all of it. For example, if you don't use sewers and tunnels often, you just skip that section and go through it. Section C, or chapter C, is ordnance and offboard artillery. So this covers guns the 2-hit process, the 2-kill process, and offboard artillery. And then Chapter D, this is the order I would approach the game. I would go through it to learn the game in this specific order. Then Chapter D is vehicles, which are, there's various kinds of vehicles. There's armored fighting vehicles of different types, and then there's trucks, sleds, various kinds of vehicles. And then in this rule book, Chapter E is miscellaneous, optional type of rules. Chapter E is desert terrain, North Africa. So if you don't play any scenarios in North Africa, you don't really need to read these rules. I'm going to be honest, I have not played any North African scenarios. I need to remedy that. Clearly, I haven't read these. And then PTO is obviously PTO, and it introduces the Japanese. And I have played some PTO in starter kit. Okay, that's a quick overview of the ASL rulebook. I should have done that in the previous video, just to give you a flavor of the size and what's in the core ASL rulebook, in this case the Pocket Edition. Now let me show you what an order of battle, a complete order of battle looks like. This is the, hopefully I can get this all on here. This is the complete American order of battle. So here's the vehicle trays. I think I've a few vehicles. No, this is all the vehicles and ordnance in the system. And some of these trays are doubled up, so they may have multiple types of vehicles or guns in one compartment. So a lot of vehicles, a lot of guns in the system. And then the top level of trays are the infantry counters. So all the different types of infantry, which I will be talking to in this video. Concealment counters, leaders, and then all of the support weapons and crews down here. Squads and half squads based on their class. That's kind of the way they're sorted. So that's a complete order of battle for one nationality. All the major nationalities have an order of battle about this size, at least in my storage. It takes up 4 of these half trays stacked in the box. Some of the nationalities only take up half of this. They would only take up that much here, infantry and all the armor, such as, I believe, the Italians and the Finns and maybe the Chinese. But there's a handful that would only take up half the space of a major nationality order of battle. Lots of counters, lots of options to play with all the vehicles and all the infantry. Okay, let's jump into the main purpose of this video is to talk about infantry components. In this case, I'm going to cover 3 things: single man counter, multi-man counter, and machine guns. The capabilities, what the numbers mean, the characteristics, that sort of thing. And the reason I do this is because in order for us to move into fire and movement mechanics, you need to understand what you're seeing on the counters, what the numbers represent, and what the units are capable of doing. I'm not going to show any support weapons other than machine guns at this point, because in the fire and move mechanics I'm going to go over, that's the only support weapon that's going to be covered. There are a multitude of support weapons that will be introduced later on in special cases, such as how to use a demo charge, how to use a flamethrower, how to use a Panzerschreck, or sorry, bazooka. Panzerschreck is a German equivalent, that sort of thing. So for now, until we roll through a majority of the infantry rules, we're going to focus on single man counter, multi-man counter, and machine guns. That'll keep us busy at least for, I don't know, quite a few more videos. So let's take a look at single man counter. There are 3 varieties. The most important at this point is going to be your infantry leader. There are also heroes, which will come into cases where a unit can battle harden and a hero can pop out. And then there are armor leaders, which will come out in Chapter D, and that's way down the road. I have no idea when I'm going to get to that. Now, For leaders, it's a two-number system. It's called a strength factor. In this case, it's a 9 minus 2. The first number is the morale. The second number is the leadership. So in this case, we have a 9 minus 2. So he has a morale level of 9, and no infantry unit can have a morale level greater than 10. So if they battle harden or go fanatic, or you can have crazy things happen during scenarios, an infantry unit can never have morale greater than a value of 10. And in this case, it's his leadership modifier is minus 2. The hyphen means something in this case. That's actually a negative 2. So when he uses his leadership to direct fire and that sort of thing, you get to use that leadership modifier on your die roll, in this case subtracting 2 from the die roll. And when we get into the mechanics of firing, I'll show you how that works. And then on the broken side, I'll set the hero and the armor leader aside because we are not going to get into them for a while. On the broken side, there's a morale level in a box. That means they have self-rally capability. So during the rally phase, they can rally themselves. Most units, most other units, squads and half squads, for them to rally, they require, not always, but 95% of the time, they need a leader in the hex with them to be able to rally. Leaders can rally themselves, and that's what the box around the broken side morale level equates to. Okay. Now, a leader has 6 movement factors. You'll see there's no movement factor on the counter. All infantry and squad leader, except for inexperienced, basically have similar movement factors. In other words, there aren't superhuman versions of infantry in some nationality that can move twice as far as others. All of them are basically humans. They can all go just about the same distance. Now, regular squad, I'm going to put this here, leader. Regular squad has 4 movement factors. There's no movement factor on any of the squads or half squads. On any of the infantry, there's no movement factor indicator. You just have to remember 6 movement factors for a leader, 4 movement factors for a squad. And that's about as much detail I'm going to get into until we go into infantry movement, which will be the next video or the video after that. And I'll talk about movement factor in more detail, how to move, how to count movement factors. When leaders and squads move together, how they do that. There's a bonus involved, and I'll get into that down the road. But just remember, leaders have 6 movement factors, squads 4 movement factors. Now, since I have this squad out here, let's talk about squads. Squads also have a strength factor. The first number is their firepower. You notice the leader didn't have a firepower. A leader without manning a support weapon or anything has no firepower capability at all. Squads and half squads and heroes have a firepower strength factor. The second number, in this case a 4, is their range in hexes. And then the last number is their morale. So in this case, we have a 7 firepower, range of 4, morale of 7. Okay. Now there are other numbers. Let me throw another couple squads up here that are a little different. That's not too different. Let me get a second line squad here. Okay. Now there are other numbers on the counters you may notice. There's a number up here, a superscript on the firepower. That is your smoke exponent. Not all squads have smoke exponents. The Americans use smoke a lot, more than most nationalities. So a lot of the American squads have a smoke exponent on their firepower strength factor, meaning they can attempt to place smoke during their movement phase. It costs movement factors to do so, and you have to roll to place the smoke, and I'll cover that in fire mechanics later. But that's what the X is on the firepower strength factor. Now you may notice a few other things on the strength factors. You may notice some of them, well, the first squad has underlines under all 3 of their strength factors. This other elite squad only unders firepower. Same with the second line squad. So if this is underlined, if the firepower strength factor is underlined, that means you can do assault fire. Meaning, if you move, if you don't prep fire and you decide to move and you move your units in the advancing fire phase, you actually get a bonus to your firepower, and I'll go over that when we get into fire mechanics. The first squad also has a underline under its range. That means spraying fire. This is a characteristic that not a lot of squads have. All machine guns have this capability, but not a lot of squads have. That means they can fire at 2 hexes at once. Their firepower is reduced, but they can fire at 2 close hexes to their unit in the same fire phase. And that's often good to when you're defending and units are trying to approach you. You can lay down spraying fire in 2 hexes adjacent to you. You can even do it when, I'm getting into detail here, I shouldn't, but you could even do it, say these two, this guy moves in here. Let's say this guy's in this building. These guys move here. This squad could use spraying fire in these 2 hexes. Even though there's nothing in this hex, they could still do spraying fire and affect this unit, and then they could lay residual fire into this hex. So if you have another unit that decides to move in there, they would get attacked by residual fire without this unit even having to roll again. So spraying fire can, So spraying fire can come in handy in some situations. I'm really bad at remembering to use it a lot of the time. When I have assault fire, I remember and I use it almost every time. Spraying fire, especially with machine guns, for some reason, is just a brain fart, and I don't remember to use that. So if you have spraying fire, try to use it when you can. Okay, the last underlying factor here is in the morale. Underlying morale equals ELR level of 5. Now the experience level rating is something that comes into scenarios if you fail your morale check, your final morale check roll. So if you have like a 2 morale check roll, plus you have to add +2 to the die roll. If your final die roll number +2 is greater than your morale plus your ELR level, that unit is, well, normally it's reduced, but if you have a underlined ELR, they split into 2 half squads. And I believe they might be able to be, I don't think they can be disrupted, but the squad has some immunity from ELR, where normally a squad would be reduced in quality. They would go from a first line to a second line, for example. If you have an underlying ELR, that doesn't happen. You get split into 2 half squads. So a lot of people, I think, believe that ELR 5 means you're immune to ELR, which is not true. ELR is just treated differently when you have an underscored morale level with an ELR of 5. Okay, now let's flip one of these over. Let's flip over this 546. Let's flip them all over. Okay, you notice none of them have the box around the broken side morale. So none of these squads can self-rally. But you may have noticed it's unbroken, this squad. In fact, all of these. This is a characteristic that the Americans have. The broken side morale level is 1 higher than the unbroken side. This is uncharacteristic for most nationalities. The thought is American units were a little bit softer as far as morale goes. They would break a little easier, but they always rallied quicker than either their peers or their opponents. So that's the reason why there's the rally number or a morale level 1 higher on the broken side than the unbroken side, which is a good characteristic for the Americans, especially when you have a squad, these 6-6 squads, which have really soft morale 6. They have a broken side morale of 8. These guys rally, they break fairly easily, but they rally a lot easier as well. So just these small differences between nationalities, the Americans and others, they kind of have an effect of how you play a certain nationality, right? Playing these 6-6-6s, I always get myself in trouble thinking, oh God, these guys are going to break. I'm going to have desperation morale guys spread all over the board. And you get a little cautious. Then it dawns on you, oh, they have a morale of 8, and they rally back fairly quickly and can get back into the game. Now let me talk about that's the strength factors for squads. For crews, this is a gun crew and this is a vehicle crew. You can tell the difference between the firepower factors. Crews always have 2 guys, and it looks like they're doing something with a mortar or something. And vehicle crews always have a 1 firepower. That's how you can tell the difference between a gun crew and a vehicle crew that sometimes pops out when you blow up a tank. Now, if you flip these over, you'll notice crews. Crews are always considered elite units, and they can self-rally. They can always self-rally. All crew can self-rally, which is nice because you can put a gun or a mortar way up on top of a hill somewhere. They don't really need a leader nearby to be able to get back into it if they break, and they can go back and man their gun. Okay, now let's talk about, since we're still on infantry, let's talk about infantry classes here. There are 5 classes of infantry, and what I'm going to do here is put squad and half squad equivalents on the board. Make sure I match these up right. These are for the Americans, clearly. Okay, classes. The Americans, so left column is full squads, right column is half squads. So if you were to break a squad into a half squad, 2 half squads, there'd be 2 counters sitting here. And some nationalities can deploy. They can break themselves full squad into 2 half squads, either during setup. I think 10% of your forces, if your nationality is able to deploy, 10% fractions rounded up can deploy prior to setup. So if you have 10 squads, for example, one of them could deploy into 2 half squads. In this case, it'd be 2. If it was this squad, it would be 2 of these. And then during the game, if you're stacked with a good order leader, you have to make a task check, and a squad, if nationality allows it, the squad can deploy into 2 half squads. The other number you may have noticed, not a number, up in the upper right, there are letters. So the lower right letters are just designators to keep track of things. So you can, if you place this unit hidden in that building, you can write on a piece of notepaper 747K is hidden initial placement in R1. It's just a note, a record keeping for things like that. But the letter up in the upper right, the E, the 1, the 2, and the G's, those are classes. And there are 5 classes. There's E, 1, 2, G, and C. Americans don't have any C's. Some nationalities do. So E means they're elite. 1 means first line. 2 obviously means second line. G equals green troops, and C equals conscripts. I know I'm going to spell something wrong while I do these. Now these two units are what is considered inexperienced. I'm used to typing. I don't write very much. Hopefully this is showing up. So the green and conscripts are considered inexperienced troops, and there are penalties involved with being an inexperienced squad. The major one being they only have 3 movement factors, which kind of sucks unless you're stacked with a leader, which helps out a little bit. In this case, there are 2. The Americans have 2 elite. The box around the other one doesn't mean it can self-rally. It's just a differentiator between the other elite. So there's 2 versions of elite squads. I got these flipped. And there are 2 versions of green squad in this is the U.S. Army. Now, the Americans also they have a fairly large order of battle. They also have Marines, which are in PTO scenarios. They have Marines and Paramarines. So this is, these guys are basically Army. Ooh, I could use my red pen. And these guys are, that doesn't show up. Those guys are Marines. Now, the Germans have something equivalent. They have their regular Wehrmacht infantry, and they also have SS infantry, sort of divided like this. And U.S. Marines are kind of considered the cream of the crop, the best troops. Same with the SS. They were the better equipped. They're the better trained. Similar sort of situation. Now back to these classes here. This is used during ELR reduction when you start failing morale checks by very large numbers. So you can have an elite unit, if it fails their morale check by an ELR value, get reduced to a first line. So not only do they break, potentially casualty reduce if you roll a 12, unfortunately, but not only do they break, they get reduced in quality if they fail a morale check by a high enough value. So this is sort of the step in ELR reduction if you start rolling really poorly on your morale checks. There's nothing below conscripts. Well, depending on how low your nationality goes. In the US version, green is as low as you go. You can't ELR below green. If you ELR below that, I'm getting ahead of myself again, you become or not a conscript, you become disrupted, which essentially means you can't do anything. You can't move, you can't self-rally, you just sit there until a leader runs back to you or happens to be stacked with you and tries to rally you. Most of the disrupted squads I end up getting end up sitting in the woods the rest of the game and never get back into it. I think I've covered everything I need to cover on how infantry kind of work at a high level, so it'll assist us when we jump into fire and move mechanics later. Okay, one last thing I'm going to cover is machine guns. Get these off without making too much of a mess. Get off my board. Let me just throw these machine guns up here. Got a light machine gun, medium machine gun, heavy machine gun from the original printing of Yanks. You can tell it's all faded green with nubs on the side. And the gun everyone loves to shoot, the American 50 caliber. Now, machine guns also have a strength factor. First number is firepower. Second number is range. So the 50 caliber has 8 firepower and a range of 16 hexes. Light machine gun, firepower of 2, range of 6, firepower of 4, range of 10, etc. The other thing you should notice is the underlined range, similar to squads. Not all squads have the ability to do spraying fire. Some squads aren't equipped with the right inherent machine guns with their squad, but all machine guns have underlined range, and all machine guns can do spraying fire. So remember that. Three other important things. Let's look at the light machine gun. There's a number in the box. In that case, they all have a number 1, 2, 3, and 3. This is your rate of fire, meaning when you roll to fire it, if the color die is equal to or less than the rate of fire number, you get to keep firing the machine gun. So the heavy machine gun, the 50 caliber, and the regular heavy, every time you roll, there's a 50% chance that you get to fire it again, and you can keep firing. Especially in prep fire, there are situations where you can lose rate of fire, such as, unfortunately, if you rolled snake eyes, you would lose rate of fire, even though it's a great roll. Well, unless you had a leader stack there. If you had a squad manning a machine gun and you happen to roll snake eyes, you would lose rate of fire because they would cower, unless they're the British, and they would be marked with a prep fire or a final fire counter. Now, if a heavy machine gun rolled that, they would also not be able to fire again because they would cower unless a leader was stuck with them. So the number in the box represents a rate of fire. Guns also have a rate of fire, and tanks also have a rate of fire, also in a box. We'll cover those way down the road. The other number to look for is this. I'll just use the light machine gun. 1 pp, 3 pp, I'll just do them out, and 5 pp for the 2 heavy machine guns. Those are portage points, so that's how much it costs a squad to lug around these machine guns. A squad has 3 portage points. A squad stacked with a leader has 4 portage points. So you can see a squad can lug around, at least Americans can lug around a medium, 3 light machine guns. They can still lug around a 5 portage point weapon, but it reduces how far they can move, and I'll get into that when we go over infantry movement. And the last number to look at is only on the light machine gun. This B11, that's a breakdown. If you roll in the 11, look at that, just rolled snake eyes. If you roll, in this case, if you're only 11 or higher, your machine gun breaks down. It either mechanically broke down, or you ran out of ammo, or you got dirt in the barrel, or something happened to it. You can't fire it until you repair it. And during the rally phase, either your rally phase or your opponent's rally phase, you can roll a single die to try to repair it. If you roll a 1, you repair. If you roll a 6, it's gone for good. It's gone forever. If you roll a 1, it's back in action, but it can break down again. I think that's all I want to cover today. I covered all the strength factors and high-level characteristics of single-man counters, except for heroes and tank leaders, armor leaders. Do that down the road. Squads, half squads. Half squads have the same capability as full squads. It's just their strength factor is different numbers, but they have. Let me take that back. they can't. They can only fire one machine gun. So a squad can fire one machine gun and their inherent firepower. So they could combine these numbers and fire the hex, or they could split their firepower and fire two different hexes. If a half squad is manning machine gun, they can only fire the machine gun. They can't fire their inherent firepower at anything. So there are some subtle differences, but essentially they are the same. They're just their strength factors are reduced. Okay, that was a slight aside there. That's it for today. I think I covered. I was afraid I wasn't going to get through it. I still want to try to make these videos fairly short, or shorter, should I say. But next, we're going to jump into infantry movement. So we're going to start moving things around on the board. I'm going to start talking about terrain, at least at a high level. I don't plan on jumping into chapter B and going into detail about every little subtlety of, how to get through a gully, and I'll leave that mostly up to you guys. But when I encounter it doing an example, I will speak to fundamentally how it works, and then I'll refer you back to the chapter B to brush up on it. Most of the terrain rules are pretty basic. The only ones, in my opinion, that are semi-difficult are hills, which once you figure it out, it's not too bad, and walls. The wall advantage and wall section is literally 6 pages in the book. It's one of the biggest sections in the rule book for one thing. It's kind of crazy. So walls and wall advantage and height and all that, it's a little complicated. But the rest of the terrain section is fairly straightforward. Okay, I'm done yakking for today. Next up, we're going to do infantry movement. Like I said, look for that whenever I get to it. Now I'm going to do my customary roll. I already rolled a snake eye, so you know what this is going to be. Average 7. Okay, I'll see you next time. Thanks.